Coming up on the Inside Indiana Business Television podcast, Noblesville is literally building momentum. Roche Diagnostics takes an innovative approach to filling its talent pipeline. What is the state of craft beer in Indiana? We take a look at the impact of the arts on the state's economy. Two brothers start a prepackaged meal company. Part 2 of our interview with Colts coach Frank Reich. And are tax incentives good or bad for economic development? Welcome to the Inside Indiana Business Television podcast. I'm Andy Ober. The developer behind a proposed $24 million mixed-use project in Noblesville says it could help spur additional investment in the city's downtown. The Levinson project comes on the heels of welcoming Borg Warner's Technical Center and a $30 million hotel and conference center. Mayor John Ditzler joined Inside Indiana Business host Gary Dick to talk about Noblesville's momentum.
Let's get right to some of these developments. There are a lot, and most significantly, and just announced here within the past week, the Levinson, as mentioned, the first apartment development in downtown Noblesville in more than a century.
Yeah. We have a rich crime building across the street, and then the first parking garage in the city of Noblesville. So we're very, very excited about it.
What does this represent? You mentioned parking, that's big. $24 million investment. It's a big mixed-use development that will result in change in Noblesville. What does it represent in your view for the city?
Well, I think it represents, first of all, preserving our history. That's really important to us. But also growing and maybe establishing history in the future, for the future. But it's the apartments certainly are for attraction of the millennials, those who want to go back to living in the apartment, perhaps some empty nesters, and attract more people to downtown. And it's been a challenge and something we wanted to do. And then around or within that building will be a parking garage, but it'll not only be for those people in the apartments. There'll be 167 brand new parking spaces in downtown, which we have needed for quite some time.
As we were talking off camera, I asked you what your biggest challenge is, and you certainly said workforce has to be at or near the top.
Yeah, I did. I'm interested in your the Workforce Academy, but yes, workforce is a challenge for all of us. That's a nationwide situation, and at all levels. You know, whether it be the server to the top leadership. It's just a matter of finding the right people, and we in Noblesville have worked hard on that, work well with the state and others, and it's really important to have the workers available.
Yeah, we talk about the Noblesville Now Capital Improvement Plan, 10 big projects, the downtown Levinson a part of that, but there are a number of things involved, including trails and other amenities that kind of get to that whole workforce.
Yes, we have a great trail system. We probably have 90 miles of trail, but the Midland goes from connects to the Monon and Westfield and goes east, and Westfield has done a great job. And then we've picked that up at Gray Road and moving that east. We're in our third phase, and we'll finish then the next phase, which will take it to Hague Road. But the third phase will finish this summer. Beautiful trail, and we're looking forward to that, as well as a river walk. The river obviously is a real asset to Noblesville, and we want to make it even more of an asset. So we have a river walk. It's taken a long time in cooperation with the county, but that will also extend south all the way to Pleasant Street.
And you're making investments in a big way in attracting new business, and also the convention business. First of all, Borg Warner, a big industrial name, has a beautiful new corporate training or corporate technical center that now calls Noblesville home.
It is, and we're very, very proud. It's the type of business we want to attract. They are leaders in the clean energy propulsion systems in the automobile industry, but they're the type of company we want to attract.
Yeah. Convention business, you've also got, again, more building going on, a new convention center with an Embassy Suites connected as well.
Yes. To be honest, we have a mayor's charity ball, and since I've been mayor, we've probably raised more than $500,000 that does go to charity, but I had to have it in some of the other communities south of us. And I just thought it was time, and it is time. And that market, I think, is big. for the smaller conventions. And again, Embassy Suites is that with 20,000 square feet, plus I think there's 5 within the hotel.
Final question for you. Is this kind of development and momentum necessary for communities of Noblesville's size to really survive and thrive, if you will, going forward?
I think so. I think if you don't grow, you die, and that doesn't matter what business, our own lives, whatever, and so that's important. But it's competitive. We're very blessed in Hamilton County, certainly, but we only, and I'm active in the Indy Partnership, but we compete within our county, but we compete with the Columbus, Ohio's, and we all know this. But it's important that Central Indiana stay together and be proactive and grow.
Yep, a lot going on, certainly in Noblesville. Noblesville Mayor John Ditzler, as always, thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
Still to come, the state of craft beer in Indiana, and how do the arts impact Indiana's bottom line? But first, Roche Diagnostics is looking to fill its talent pipeline through a partnership with the University of Indianapolis. The newly created Roche Academy aims to train the next generation of biomedical equipment technicians. Inside Indiana business reporter Mary Rachel Redmond has the story.
With an aging workforce,
we will have about 15% of our employees retire over the next 5 years. And so as we started to look at the talent that we need today, the talent that we need tomorrow, we were starting to see that we were going to have a pretty big gap.
The solution? A partnership with the University of Indianapolis called the Roche Academy.
The Roche Academy is our ability to create a very targeted talent pipeline for Roche for a role that we have called a field service engineer. It can be a challenging role, and you have to have, special training, and you have to have special qualifications in order to work on our instruments.
Through the Roche Academy, UIndy students will receive a Roche customized curriculum plan coupled with a summer internship where they'll get hands-on training using actual Roche equipment, teaching students the necessary skills to ultimately land a job offer upon graduating.
Assuming there's good performance and assuming still willingness to be in the program, then we will extend an offer to them at the end of their junior year, at the end of their summer internship. And with that comes a sign-on bonus and a firm offer in hand, which is many seniors would love to have that opportunity as they're starting their senior year in college.
To have Roche pick us out of a number of institutions to be able to work with them connects the pipeline from education to work. It lets people who are genuinely passionate about chemistry and biology see other options besides med school for them after they leave college. One of the biggest things is to help Roche solve their pipeline problem, and so I hope that they get out of it the employees that they need to be successful in their work.
I am expecting that this will definitely be a competitive advantage for us. Not only will we be able to keep a constant flow of that talent coming into Roche, but we will also reduce the time to be able to support our customers, say from 12 months to possibly 8 to 9 months. And that's huge. That's real dollar savings and also just a better experience for our employees and customers.
Mary Rachel Redmond, Inside Indiana Business.
Later in the podcast, what does Indiana's economy owe to the arts? And Hoosier Brothers offer a new healthy eating option. But now, about 7 years ago, there were just a handful of breweries in Indiana, but the movement was gaining steam. Now, there are more than 160 craft breweries operating in the state. Brewers of Indiana Guild Executive Director Rob Caputo and Draft Beer Management System Steady Serve Technology CEO Steve Hirschberger weigh in on the state of craft beer.
Rob, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us an idea? As I mentioned, a lot of growth over the last 6-7 years, from a handful of breweries to more than 160. What's been really driving the growth?
Well, I think a lot of folks obviously are focused on local these days. There's just also a lot of craft beer fans out there. So what we see is this home brew into pro brew thing. I know I got into it that way myself. But I also, again, comes back to local. I think we've got a bunch of folks that are interested in hyper-localizing what they consume, whether that's beer or food. We see that with the restaurant industry. So I think that's been a big driver. I also think the climate here from a brewery law legal perspective, despite what you hear nationally about Indiana's alcohol laws, It's very, very pro-brewery. We can thank the State House for that. And I talk to other guilds, and there's always challenges in other states. So I think all of that helps. And I also think the state has done a good job of getting people to invest in businesses, local business, and support those businesses.
Steve gives a thumbnail of SteadyServe Technologies, really an inventory management company, but doing more than that now, providing data and analytics that help brewers and others, retailers in the beer business.
That's right, Gary. So we've evolved from really trying to help retailers manage waste to help them grow their top line by looking at data and information that's coming from a host of retailers in specific zip codes, specific cities, specific regions of the country to assist them in making proper product choices that are aligned with what consumers are really wanting to spend their money on and ensure that they've always got availability and really visibility of the brands that make sense for them to drive incremental share of wallet.
And how's the craft portion of the business factor into all this?
Well, that's a great question, because what we're seeing both nationally, there's been about a 9% shift in consumption pattern from on-premise retail, so bars, restaurants, taverns, to tap rooms, so brewery tap rooms. And as an example, you've got Sun King's new tap room in Carmel. You've got Chili Water down in Fountain Square. You have a host of facilities that service customers themselves. And they do an excellent job in representing the brand as well as the education to the consumer. So the consumer is experiencing that. But when they go back into the retail environment, what they're expecting is that same level of visibility and that same level of information. And in some cases that's true, but in many cases that's not yet true. So our job is to help retailers bring up that standard of availability and visibility to ensure that they've got the right experience for the consumer.
Rob, talk about, everyone hears about Sun King and Three Floyds in Northwest Indiana and Upland, some of the big breweries. But as we were talking off camera, as you see growth going forward for Indiana, it's kind of about more hyper-local.
Yeah,
from a business model standpoint.
Yeah, and I've just been traversing the state picking up beer to get out to Great American Beer Fest, and I've been in Leesburg, Indiana, which is a tiny town. There's a brewery there, and what we're seeing is, and I think this is just kind of a natural progression of any state, is you've got these population centers that you obviously have a host of available locations that eventually reaches some level of for lack of a better term, saturation. And then what you're seeing is you've got these folks who are still interested in growing it that are in small local communities, set up an independent business. It's either a cornerstone for redevelopment or somebody that's a community gathering place that's servicing the local community on a variety of levels. And that's kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing this kind of hybrid brew pub model focused on beer with a small kitchen or food available and trying to get those communities involved. The challenge we have right now, obviously, is the minors in a brewery laws, which are, and those are things that we're working on as a guild. So,
all right, lots going on certainly in the craft beer industry in Indiana. Rob Caputo, the executive director of the Brewers of Indiana Guild. Steve Hirschberger from SteadyServe Technologies. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Gary.
Remember, you can catch Inside Indiana Business Television on stations throughout the state every weekend. Head to InsideIndianaBusiness.com to check listings. Still to come, Hoosier Brothers launch a packaged meal company, and new Colts coach Frank Reich talks X's and O's. But first, as the competition for talent continues, arts and culture is a growing factor in quality of place and making the state more attractive. A study last year pegged the economic impact of the arts in Indianapolis alone at more than $440 million. Americans for the Arts Vice President Randy Cohen came in studio to talk about the importance of the arts in a growing economy.
As I mentioned, the arts serve so many purposes, inspire us, entertain us. But this whole economic impact sometimes not talked about a lot. You're just out with an economic impact study you do every 5 years, some pretty striking numbers.
Yeah, amazing numbers. And number one, Indianapolis, great arts city. And I sure hope everybody here appreciates it because I love coming to visit. And just what you said, the arts create the communities we want to live in and work in. But the fact is, they're also businesses. And like you said, a $440 million industry right here in the city. And that's got great economic benefits. That supports jobs, 14,792 jobs right here in the city. So the art's not just food for the soul, putting food on the table for close to 15,000 households.
Pretty good tagline there.
Thank
I should
you.
mention that Randy's in town to be the keynote speaker at the Start With Art Luncheon, 32nd annual, largest business arts event of its kind in the country. Reflective of the arts community here. And talk about, though, because this is a pretty expansive study. You examined hundreds of cities and regions around the country.
Yeah, it's a big national study, largest of its kind across the country. And but what we do is we look at spending by the arts organizations right here in the community. I mean, we do it nationally as well, but right here are the findings. So just the arts organizations themselves spend $227 million, and that's a myth buster. Yep. Arts organizations are businesses. They employ people locally. They purchase goods and services in the community. They're members of the Chamber of Commerce. But there's also a real value add aspect to the arts. And think of the last time you went to an arts event. Just like slip outside, see the show, and like run back home? No, you probably had dinner and paid for parking and babysitting. The typical attendee spends $30.67 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. So that generates another $212 million of economic activity.
And then to layer on top of that, because we do so much about talent attraction here, attracting and retaining talent, and the investment that communities are making in quality of life, quality of place, and the arts factor into that.
Yeah, this is about community competitiveness. And in this economy, everyone's trying to attract the most talented, best educated workforce, because if that's where the workers are, that's where the businesses go. And it's different than when I came up. I got out of college, I'd go to whoever'd have me. But the research by business associations like the Conference Board shows creativity is now among the top 5 applied skills business leaders are looking for. It's leapfrog the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? Well, of course you have to be able to, read, write, and do math. But if you can apply some creativity to your scientific, your engineering knowledge, that's how you prosper in a global economy. 72% of business leaders say creativity is of high importance. And the biggest indicators of creativity, starting your own company and study of the arts.
Very good. Big study, economic impact of the arts, 440 million plus here in Indianapolis. Randy Cohen, thanks very much. Thanks for coming to Indianapolis as well. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right.
Later in the podcast, part 2 of our interview with the Colts' new head coach, and a look at whether tax incentives help economic development. But now, Hamid Nouri has a doctorate in pharmacy and a collection of bodybuilding championships. He's also co-owner of King Cal Meals, along with his brother Sam. The Nouris talked about their prepackaged meal company with Kylie Valletta in the business of health.
Sam, let's start with you.
Sure.
You hear about a new food prep or meal service program, every day of the week. What do you think makes King Cal Meals different or unique?
Well, we don't freeze our meals. The first thing is that our meals are fresh and we don't freeze our meals. And shelf life on the meals are 5 to 6 days, and all they need to do is just throw them in microwave for 2 minutes and just enjoy it.
And no added flavors, no added preservatives,
Correct.
No added salt.
Correct. So the salt usually comes with some ingredients, very minimal, but we don't add any oils or any preservative or any of that.
And Hamid, you're a pharmacist, and you quit your day job
Correct.
to run the company. Also do bodybuilding on the side. So
I'm trying.
So you don't market the company as a weight loss program, but what kind of health benefits do your customers see?
Well, let me tell you why I'm not practicing as a pharmacist anymore. Instead of waiting for my patients to come into the store, we decided to help a community stay healthy. So basically, we cannot market it as preventive process, but help our clients and community stay healthy. So decided to go with portion control meals, which is a balanced amount of everything in each portion, protein, complex carb, and vegetables. So I think that following some sort of diet, some sort of right amount of eating will help the community to stay healthy.
And I love that your mom is the head chef, so it's a family, local operation. You're doing really well here locally here in Central Indiana, but you have some growth plans. Tell us what you have in mind.
Sure. We're trying to expand, and right now we do ship nationwide, and all of the states around us, like Indiana, I mean our state, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, all the surrounding states, they go next day, and the shipping cost is lower. But if the customers are a little bit further out, we give them an option that we can freeze their meals in order to keep their shipping costs low and down. And excuse me, and so basically we can ship nationwide, but next day air is really expensive for states like they're further out. That's why we give them that option.
We also talked to several businesses who are kind of related to food or health to bring our meals in, and that will be our selling point.
Mm-hmm. And you're part of Indiana Grown, which is a big
correct,
initiative here in Indiana. And you said catering is really catching on at your company as well.
Yes, besides our meal prep service that we're providing to our customers, catering for business meetings, for parties that people want to have healthy meals, and for their parties, so we'll be there for them and we make it happen. We have a bunch of businesses that and customers that they do so for their meetings and parties.
And you mentioned off camera that, one thing when you're ordering from you versus a national chain is that your meal hasn't traveled as far.
Correct. So since we make them all here in Indiana, I mean, we're based in Carmel, and we have to keep all of our expiration date current due to the fact that we don't freeze our meals. So everything is always fresh, and that's correct.
Travel time is minimal, basically.
Minimal.
And you mentioned that your kitchen does mass quantities about 2 days per week, thinking about adding 1 day per week, right?
Correct. We're trying to push and squeeze all the orders in 2 days. That would be easier to handle and all that. But we are expanding. Right now we're cooking on Tuesdays and Fridays. We are thinking to expanding and adding more days to our cooking days.
Well, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it, and good luck as you look at expanding.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Still to come, are tax incentives worth it when it comes to economic development? But first, the preseason is over, and now the Colts are looking ahead to the opener. In part 2 of Bill Benner's one-on-one interview with head coach Frank Reich, we look at the season ahead and how his love for football runs in the family.
You're known for 2 of the greatest comebacks in college and pro football history. Maryland over Miami in the Orange Bowl, and then the Buffalo Bills over the Houston Oilers in the AFC playoffs. Mm-hmm. So can you orchestrate that kind of comeback for the Indianapolis Colts here in your first season as the head coach?
What we're trying to do is the same thing, and it really revolves around when you are started out slow and you have a chance to kind of come back and overcome difficult circumstances. What I've learned through the years is it just takes a complete team effort, buy-in at every level by every person in the organization, and so that's our goal.
What have you discovered so far about your roster in the Indianapolis Colts?
I've discovered that we worked really hard to identify players who would be Colts, true Colts, embody the kind of culture and character that we're looking for. And you don't know ultimately until you get in the fire together a little bit, start working hard, getting in meetings, seeing how hard guys work, how much they're together. And so far we're seeing really, really great things as far as the team coming together.
Culture is an important word, philosophy, something to build on.
As a head coach and as a GM, we can help direct the ship in certain ways. But ultimately, what I've experienced and what Chris has experienced is that when you have leaders in the locker room who believe and embody the culture, that's when you got something special.
How will you work here with your offensive coordinator, Nick Sirianni, and how play calling, how's that all going to work?
It'll be real similar. In Philadelphia, Doug was calling the plays just like I'll call them here. And in Philadelphia, I was assisting Doug and helping him, not just in suggesting plays every now and then, but really in the whole formulation of the game plan. It's really a group. We really collaborate. We really, really believe in a collaboration. And we have really good coaches. Nick Sirianni is an incredible offensive mind. The rest of our offensive staff also really good coaches. So we'll collaborate there. But then on game day, it'll primarily be Nick and I. I'll be calling him. Nick will be the one voice in my ear that we'll be going back and forth talking about ideas.
I've heard a lot of concerns about the defense. And again, it's very, very early in its development. But what do you see that encourages you?
I see from Matt just a real disciplined, tough coach, and I expect that's going to come out in the defense. And I know the defensive system that we play, this Tampa 2 scheme, in many respects is a throwback scheme, and it has unique characteristics about it. It's like playing an offense who does something that other offenses don't do, so defense has to totally adjust. And in a similar way, this Tampa 2 scheme, with a lot of the things that it does, will bring offenses problems, and if we can play it the way we need to play it, disciplined and then with intense effort.
Your dad played at Penn State. You're a kid from Pennsylvania. Went to Maryland. I mean, football it's always been a part of your life, right?
It is. I mean, my dad was like you said, was a captain of the team at Penn State, was drafted in the NFL. Back in those days, he decided he wanted to be a school teacher and forego his athletic career, but ended up being a high school teacher and coach. And my brother's been a head coach at a Division II school for 18 years, so it's definitely in our blood.
And 10 years after your first stint with the Colts, Tony Dungy, Jim Caldwell, and now you're back, but Jim Irsay and the Irsay families, this has to be a strong connection there to again be working for the Irsay family.
It really is. It's easy for me to see that because it early on in the process, even from the time I signed the contract, being over at the Irsay home, seeing their family. This is a family-run business, and Mr. Irsay has 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters. I've been around their family just on a handful of occasions, and to see the interaction, I like that family atmosphere. And so our challenge is to take that family atmosphere, put it into an organization, and let the values that flow from that family into the organization, into our players, and really just have an impact in this community.
And finally this week, are tax breaks and other incentives a good use of public dollars to promote economic development? Our Eye on Economic Development report with KSM Location Advisors will explore a new 4-part series called Taking a Deeper Dive into Site Selection with CEO Tim Cook and President Katie Culp.
To kind of tee this up, you hear a lot about tax abatement and tax increment financing and all kinds of incentives that are used to attract investment, expansions, and those types of things. Can you make a general statement off the top? Are they good? Are they bad? Or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, I think the short answer is they are good. They are effective tools if used reasonably and responsibly. I think from a micro level, they help deals get done. At a macro level, it's really helped Indiana achieve the reputation they have as a great place to do business.
Yeah, and Katie, I guess it depends in terms of how you look at incentives from administration to administration. Different political parties have different, outlooks on the use of incentives.
Yeah, there are certainly changes and nuances. Some are minor and some are major. It's a hot topic to put political campaigns around. I might add a little bit to it and disagree a tiny bit with Tim. I think if incentives could be eliminated everywhere in the country, then maybe they wouldn't be necessary. There are some valid arguments against them in terms of, we'll talk a lot about that today, but I think the fact that they are never going to be eradicated everywhere, and every state and community is going to have some tools in their toolbox to incentivize economic development, you have to participate as long as everybody else is. And so to that extent, I think even those administrations who might not be so gung-ho on incentives, they recognize that. So even when you're a little more conservative about their application, you've still got to play the game somehow.
All right, let's talk about some of the criticisms of incentives to win deals. First of all, the state is picking winners and losers, and the companies receiving the incentives have an unfair advantage.
Yeah, that's just not really what we see in practice. The state does a return on investment calculation on every one of these deals. And at the end of the day, they're trying to figure out, is this a project that we want to try to attract? Every project, has its own fact-sensitive pattern. But at the end of the day, we think they are needed.
The return on investment, as you look from a state standpoint, does that return on investment typically justify the size of the incentives that are being offered?
It has to, or they won't support the project. And I think this is a greater sophistication you've seen. I don't know that 20 years ago when I first got in this business, certainly in Indiana, but I think even across the country, people weren't looking at the analysis so much. But I mean, it's a big part of every conversation we have with every deal we work on.
And so from a state government standpoint, the decision to dole out incentives is a process. They really look at it and look at that return on investment.
Yeah, I mean, there's payroll taxes, there's, corporate income taxes, even if it passes through to different types of legal entities. They've got to make sure that all of the other impacts, direct tax revenue and indirect kind of multiplier effect stuff, can justify the use of any sort of performance-based incentives that do come about.
Here's one I've heard on a number of occasions from some folks. Incentives aren't needed because these deals are going to happen anyway.
Yeah. Well, with Indiana, they've got built in their statute with their main incentive that you have to have what's called a but-for test, which means but for the incentives being offered, the project would not happen. And so that's something that Katie and I run into with projects that we do throughout the country, which is you have to have a competitive element to that. If you can't meet that test, then by statute, those incentives can't be offered.
Okay. How about, again, here's another one, and we see some publicity about this, but if a deal that is offered incentives goes bust, the companies don't create the jobs they were going to create, the investment they were going to make, those types of things. What happens to the incentive?
Indiana is great because their programs are structured to be performance-based, and it's smart. I think like Texas many years ago had a close the deal fund that got a lot of attention where they paid the money first and then you performed, and then it gets real messy. You've got to go policing and try to pull back the money. You don't get the benefits here unless you are creating the jobs, making the investment. But in those carrier type of situations that are very visible, there are clawbacks, and you're contractually obligated to pay that back. So they have been smart about the way they're putting money on the table and with the strings attached to it.
And in that case, Indiana is very aggressive in enforcing those clawbacks.
Yeah.
So
would you assess Indiana compared to some other states in terms of those clawbacks, that they're pretty aggressive in terms of policing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Indiana's as aggressive as any state in the country when it comes to, we've got a contract in place. If a company leaves the state, we're going to try to take back those incentives. I think they are
totally agree.
At the top of the list.
Yeah. Where do we go? Big picture. What do you think the key is to ensuring incentives don't run into some of these pitfalls and they are used appropriately going forward?
I think the key is going to be, do you have a state agency that's monitoring it? Do you have reporting? Do you continue to use things like return on investment calculations to make sure that you're using them in the right instances? If you have some of those controls in place, then I think you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls.
Yeah, and Katie, I think to your point too, I think what you were saying earlier, in a perfect world, great, we don't need incentives, but that's not the world in which we live.
Yeah, these business decisions, we are not that unique as a state. There are other states that offer a lot of the similar benefits from the whole big picture. And so if we want to win those deals from an Illinois or a Missouri or what have you, we've got to be able to play the game.
All right, very good. Interesting commentary on incentives. I know part 2 next month, you're going to be talking about the use of analytics and data in site selection. And I know that's a big issue as well. We'll look forward to that.
Thanks, Gary.
That wraps up this week's Inside Indiana Business Television podcast. Remember, you can find all of this week's TV segments, as well as the top business news from throughout the state at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. While you're there, you can also subscribe to our platform of free e-newsletters. This is Andy Ober for Inside Indiana Business.